A series of EU nations have started to make their cases for the nomination as the bloc's next cybersecurity hub. This week I take a look at the battle for Europe's new cyber centre. Welcome to Euractiv's Digital Brief podcast, where we bring you a specially curated digital and tech story from the week in the world of EU politics and policy. For a full breakdown of all the most important stories over the past 7 days in this patch, sign up to my free newsletter or take a look at it online at euractiv.com. My name is Samuel Stolten, and this is Euractiv's Digital Brief podcast.
This episode is powered by Google. Google is committed to helping 10 million people and businesses find jobs, digitize and grow through easy-to-use products and training to support Europe during the pandemic. Find out more on g.co/grow with Google.
Brussels, Munich, Lyon, Vilnius, Luxembourg, Bucharest and Warsaw have all put their names forward as the potential new home of the future European Cybersecurity, Industrial, Technology and Research Competence Centre. In 2018, the European Commission presented a regulation establishing the centre, which would receive funding from both the Digital Europe and Horizon Europe programmes as part of the next EU long-term budget. The objective of the new project, which would operate alongside a network of national competence hubs, would be to centralise the European cybersecurity technological and industrial ecosystem and pool resources in the field, as a means to bolster the bloc's resilience in the face of increasing cybersecurity threats. Earlier this week, Poland made a particularly bold claim for the seat of the new cyber hub, with Polish Prime Minister Morawiecki writing to EU nations, making the case for Warsaw to host the centre. Poland plays a very active role at the EU level regarding international cybersecurity standards and chairs and co-chairs several thematic working groups on cybersecurity matters, Morawiecki wrote. But hot on the heels of Poland this week was Spain. On Thursday, Spain's Secretary of State for Digitalization and Artificial Intelligence, Carme Artigas, spoke to reporters about her country's priorities should Lyon be successful in its bid. She noted how the country's track record in connectivity, territorial cohesion, and the country's ambitions in 5G as being the main reasons why the city should host the new cybersecurity centre. This is what she had to say.
Spain is going to be the first country in deploying 5G, and 5G cybersecurity is the most relevant issue we need to face as a European Union, and as according to what Manuel already said, it has to do with our future European digital sovereignty. So I have no doubt we have the best technical candidacy from the technical point of view. And we also need that there is an explicit effort, an explicit message through this candidacy. We are the only candidacy in the south of Europe. And I think that the only thing we need is that we all want to send a message that also technology investment can be outside the main cities and outside the center of Europe. So I think this really will for territorial cohesion can be explicitly demonstrated if we are chosen as the chosen place.
Interestingly enough, over recent months, the European approach to 5G cybersecurity has become somewhat fragmented. Certain nations have adopted more rigorous approaches in securing their next-generation telecommunications networks as part of a wider US-led campaign against the inclusion of particular Chinese vendors, such as Huawei and ZTE, in 5G infrastructure. In this climate, bilateral agreements to cooperate on 5G cybersecurity have been signed between the US administration and some EU nations, including Poland, Estonia, Latvia, the Czech Republic, Slovenia, Bulgaria and Slovakia. The UK and France have limited the future involvement of high-risk vendors in their 5G networks, and Sweden's telecoms regulator PTS recently attempted to impose an outright ban on Huawei and ZTE, to which the former appealed, and Stockholm's administrative court suspended the ban. Poland, of course also a contender in the race for the new cyber centre, as I mentioned above, recently published its draft cybersecurity law, proposing new risk assessment criteria, which certain firms, such as China's Huawei, fear could lead to a de facto ban of its equipment in the country's 5G network infrastructure. The bill states that telecoms firms in the country would not be able to purchase equipment from high-risk vendors and would have to replace existing equipment provided by that specific supplier within a period of 5 years. In response to the move, Huawei penned a letter to the EU's Vice President for Digital, Margareta Vestager, accusing the country's plans of being contrary to the fundamental principles of the EU. But I digress. Let's get back to the main issue here. For Spain, a unified approach to 5G cybersecurity is the best way to move forward. Manuel Muniz, Secretary of State for Global Spain, noted this week how the country's forthcoming 5G toolkit would be aligned with the EU toolbox on the security of 5G networks, which the Commission presented earlier this year. In January, the EU executive tasked member states with assessing the risk profiles of telecom providers, with a view to applying restrictions for those vendors considered to be high risk. An update on the measures is forthcoming. But this is what Muniz had to say on the matter.
Spain's position on this has been to remain very closely aligned with what the EU proposes for this area of work. So we're very, very aligned with the toolkit that has been produced, and we're now looking at ways of bringing that into our national sort of normative and strategic framework.
However, this would not necessarily mean that Spain would seek to adopt measures similar to the UK or France and alienate certain providers, said Nicolas Pascual de la Parte, Spain's Special Ambassador for Cybersecurity and Hybrid Threats.
Cyberspace has to be, as I've said, a global common, not a kind of means of segregation of the international community. And Spain is very much in favor of a free, secure, inclusive, and fair access to the cyberspace. And that's why we will consider any kind of providers on its own merit, and with taking into account the need for privacy and guarantee of security of the communications.
An inclusive cyberspace, that's the key message from the Spanish there. More broadly, in the bid for the EU's new cybersecurity hub, applications from the likes of Poland and Spain, as well as the others, will be assessed by the Commission before the 2nd of December and are set to be presented to EU ambassadors on December the 9th. Finding common ground between all EU nations may not be so easy, as the decision will require the unanimous approval from EU member states. Stay tuned for more on this issue. And that's all we've got time for this week. Please remember that online with us you can get a comprehensive breakdown of all the tech stories in the EU politics and policy domain with my free digital brief newsletter. Sign up online today, and don't forget to also subscribe to this podcast, which is published on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and Amazon Music. I've been Samuel Stolton, and thank you very much indeed for listening.